Alright, welcome to the channel. My name's James and Skaventide isn't too far away. Hopefully you've got your box ordered and you're excited about all the new models. I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with you how I'm going to paint my Skaven. I'm going to be shooting for some white fur with loads of texture across the entirety of the model, so let's get into it. And this is what we're going to be painting up today. We're going to focus mainly on the skin, the fur and the materials across this model. You'll need a number of paints to be able to achieve this. You'll need some Khorne red, Bugman's glow, Cadian Fleshtone, Karak stone, Rhinox hide, XV88, Mechanicus standard grey, Dawnstone, titanium white are your favourite white paint, Abaddon black, Moonray flesh and Wraithbone. All the paints will be listed below in the description along with the Games Workshop equivalents. So we're just going to start off blocking in the main areas across the model. With some Bugman's glow, I'm just going to block in all of the flesh areas, and then with Mechanicus standard grey, I'm going to block in all of the fur. I'm aiming for something of like a dirty white for my fur across the Skaven. We're going to build up a lot of texture in this area to try and make it really believable. Now you don't need me to teach you how to suck eggs, but just aim to get a couple of layers down to achieve a nice even base coat. Now we're going to grab some Dawnstone and we're going to quickly block in some of the highlight areas across the fur. We're not worried about trying to build texture or anything too much right now. We're just looking to establish the main highlight areas and kind of give an impression of the volumes and the musculature within the model. So you'll see I'm working quite quickly here. I've got a big brush, I've got a size 2 Artist Opus here so I can get that paint down fast. Now around the face there's a lot of sculpted texture within the fur, so we want to start picking some of that out with the Dawnstone. We're using short, fast brush strokes here just to give that impression of the fur, basically using hatching or hashing across these areas to produce those small lines and create that detail. But again, I'm not spending too much time on this, I'm working quite quickly. I'm really only blocking in the main bits of information. Doing the same across those highlight areas just to create some distortion and some noise around those volumes, and also to give that impression of the fur in these areas. So we're really just laying down that foundation at the minute, not spending a huge amount of time on it or worrying about really creating that texture just yet. Now with the skin, I'm taking a 50-50 mix of Cadian Fleshtone and Bugman's glow, and I'm just starting to block in those main volumes again. Really just looking to create shape and structure within the model at this point, essentially sketching in all of those details. So you can leave that Bugman's glow base layer in the deepest of recesses, but other than that, just get that 50-50 mix all over the main areas of the model. Now we're coming back in with that Cadian Fleshtone, spending a wee bit more time working on the highlights here, trying to pick out some more individual details. But again, we're really just sketching in a lot of that information, brightening up certain areas, drawing attention to certain features and structures like within the tail, within the fingers, looking to start picking out those knuckles and various features across the model. Now if you've managed to get yourself a copy of Skaventide, there are a lot of models in there to paint. So I'm not spending a huge amount of time blending or creating soft transitions here. I'm using semi-transparent layers to build up the opacity of the color and to naturally create those transitions. So I'm not going to be coming in with any glazes or anything like that to soften out these transitions. I'm aiming to give you the most bang for your buck with these techniques and these processes across your Skaven. Now we're just going to grab some Moonray flesh, mix that in with our Cadian Fleshtone, again shooting for that 50-50 semi-transparent layer. And we're just going to start picking out some of those more prominent details within the face, drawing some attention towards the muzzle and the nose and the ears. But this is an opportunity to direct the focus and attention in the model, so we want to draw some attention towards the face. So I'm just focusing a bit more around the nose, really looking to pick out those sharp details within the face. In the hands, we're just looking to pick out each of the digits and the knuckles, again just drawing attention to those small details in those areas. Now for these smaller details, I've switched down to a size 0 here to give me a bit more control and a bit more accuracy. If you need to go smaller, by all means do so. Work with what you're comfortable with. And then with the tail, we're just picking out each of the segments, just drawing a bit more attention to the detail in those areas, but focusing on the parts of the tail that are perpendicular to the light source. Or basically, I'm just not adding these highlights to the underside of the tail. Lastly, we're just going to grab some Moonray flesh and hit some of the more important details around the face, Again, focusing on that muzzle, on the nose, and on the ears. Because we're going to be doing some white fur, I've lightened up the flesh quite a bit here, but if you're doing something that's a bit darker, you can obviously skip this step. Just do the same with those prominent knuckles and features across the hands and the feet, and also in the different segments of the tail. Again, we're just focusing on those parts that are perpendicular to the light source, so I'm not adding these highlights to the underside of the tail. So now to really start building up the interest and texture within the fur, we're going to be using a mix of Karak stone and Dawnstone to start creating some highlights and indication of each individual strand of hair across the body. So you can see I'm starting to move my brush in different directions, trying to give the impression that the hair flows in different ways and lies over itself in different patterns and stuff, just to give more information, more detail, and more texture across these areas. By doing this, we're also letting some of those previous layers show through, so you'll see some of that Mechanicus standard grey, some of that Dawnstone, and because we're using semi-transparent layers, you'll get some variation within the opacity and the coverage of these strokes, which just gives you more information for not a whole lot of work. So on the head here, you can see I'm starting towards the back of the head and then continuing to move forward, allowing those individual strands of hair to almost overlap with each other and just give more information, more variation, and more detail. And it's the same with the body. I'm starting towards the bottom and then working up towards the shoulder, allowing those strands and those strokes to fall over each other and create more variation within the colours. So now adding some titanium white into that mix, or your favourite white paint, we're just going to repeat the same process, layering up each of the strokes using that hatching or hashing pattern to create more texture and more variation within the fur. Again, we're going to try to get those strokes and strands of hair to overlap and fall on top of each other to create more variation and more texture in these areas. And you can already see how the effect's taken shape in the body and in the face. You've got loads of information, loads of different brush strokes, but really we haven't spent a whole lot of time trying to create that. It's just been randomly applying strokes across the body and across the hair. If you're enjoying the videos so far, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps promote the videos and helps the channel grow. Also, if you're feeling frisky, give that subscribe a wee slap and a tickle. You can also drop a comment below to help please the algorithm. And with the head, I'm being very deliberate with my strokes, really trying to build that texture and give the impression of each individual strand of hair here. And just do the same across the rest of the body. Now with this higher value mix, you can focus on the more prominent details and the areas that are being affected by the light and any sculpted fur within the model. And as you're working over these larger sections, try to vary the length of your brush stroke as well, just to give more variation and impression of each individual strand of hair. Finally, in those areas where you want to really grab the viewer's attention, come in with some pure titanium white or your favourite white paint and just throw in a few additional highlights. Work to frame the eyes and various features within the face just to help give them more shape, more structure, and more attention. And this technique will work with pretty much any colour of fur you decide to go for. So say you want to do some brown fur, start out with some Rhinox hide, Mournfang brown, maybe some Doombull brown to add in some colour variation, and then maybe something like an XV88 for those super bright highlights. And for black fur, you could just use Abaddon black, Mechanicus standard grey, and Dawnstone. Just maybe create some intermediate mixes between those just to give yourself a wee bit more range. Now when it comes to painting the trousers, we're going to be using Abaddon black and Karak stone here. We're going to be using a kind of stippling and scratching technique just to build up a lot of texture and information in these areas. I'm going to be doing this with quite a large brush, so I'm using a size 2 and really just throwing in dots around the different folds and different areas of the material. Once I'm happy with the first layer, I'm just going to add in some titanium white, or again your favourite white paint, and just repeat the process, again focusing on those more prominent details and folds within the materials and drawing attention to any holes or damage along the way. So now you can see that the trousers get quite bright because of the addition of the titanium white, but to dull that down we're going to come in with a wash or a glaze of Abaddon black. We're just going to apply that all over the trousers. This will help to dull them down, it'll help darken the recesses, and it'll just help to mute those colours and let the fur really stand out. Now you can apply as many passes of this wash as you want to darken down the trousers. I think I went with 2, maybe 3 whenever I was doing it. Now when it comes to painting the cloak, we're going to start off with some Khorne red mixed with some Abaddon black. Roughly about a 50-50 mix here, but just enough to darken it down, and just apply that all over the cloak. To start blocking in the main highlights, we're going to add some more Khorne red into the mix, so you roughly have like about a 3:1 or 4:1 ratio here, and just start blocking in those big folds within the material. I'm not spending too much time trying to be perfect here, I'm just looking to leave that darker mix within the recesses. Now I've switched back down to my size 0 here, and I'm coming in with some pure Khorne red, and I'm going to start picking out some more of the details and folds within the material. We'll not be taking this material too bright, so we want to really focus on creating some contrast within these colours. So look to create nice bold and opaque layers with your Khorne red. So this means you'll need to build it up over a couple of passes, maybe 2 to 3, to really get that nice saturation and opacity within the colour. And if you want to have smoother transitions between each of these layers, leave some of the previous layer showing as you apply more layers of Khorne red. Now to give the cloak a bit of wear and tear, we're going to mix some Karak stone in with the Khorne red. And we're just going to look to start highlighting those more prominent folds and areas where the cloak might have taken some damage. Now you might have noticed that we're using Karak stone to highlight a number of areas across the model. We've used it in the fur, we've used it in the trousers, we've used it in the cloak, and I think we're going to use it in the bandages as well, but this just helps to create some harmony and consistency across the model by using effectively like a universal highlight color. So if you can find a way to incorporate it into your other models, it'll give you some real consistency and continuity across your entire army. Also, I should say I'm not 100% sure on what ratio I used, but I'm going to assume it's probably 2 parts Khorne red to 1 part Karak stone to start. Again, we're going to be using semi-transparent layers, so add a bit of water, thin your paint down, usual process. Adding a bit more Karak stone into the mix, roughly about a 50-50 mix here. We're just going to start focusing on some of the details closer to the face and some of the areas where the cloak may have sustained more damage. So for the leathers and bandages, grab yourself some Rhinox hide and some Karak stone. Apply a nice even layer of Rhinox hide all over those sections, and then create a mix of Rhinox hide and Karak stone and start dropping in some highlights and some texture within these areas. Again, you can see I'm using a size 0 here. I'm using smaller brush strokes again to impart some texture and some additional detail to these areas. So add a wee bit more Karak stone to your original mix and just sort of pick out some scratches, some details and some edges within those leather sections. So when it comes to highlighting up the bandages, we want to leave that Rhinox hide in the recesses just to create some deep separation within these components and just help them stand out a wee bit against the rest of the model. Now create a 50-50 mix of Wraithbone and Karak stone and just start dropping in some highlights across the bandages. Try to create some definition within the volumes and focus on some of the areas that are going to be a bit more prominent or catching a bit more light. And lastly, to paint your ropes, you're going to need some Rhinox hide and some XV88. So just lay down a base coat of Rhinox hide, come back in with some XV88 over the top, follow up with a mix of XV88 and Wraithbone and just start highlighting each of the strands or the segments within the rope. Then just add a bit more Wraithbone to pick out the final few details. And with that, your Skaven should be pretty much done and should look something a bit like this. All you have to do is go in and block in those metallic sections, add a couple of washes just to give that sort of grim, dirty look to them. But you can really see how that hatching technique creates a lot more depth and interest to the fur and to the model. The red cloak and materials will really stand out against any warpstone or green that you add to your models. And by keeping the rest of the details more subtle and muted, it really lets all those more prominent details shine. I look forward to seeing how you apply these techniques to your Skaven. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions for future videos, please drop them below in the comments. And if you want to show me what you've been working on, head on over to the Discord and drop some pics into the whips or the completed projects. I'd love to see what you've been painting. If you'd like to get some personalised coaching and tuition, head on over to the Patreon and check out the available packages. There'll be something there to suit everybody. All links can be found below in the description. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the next one.